If the worst decision you made last week was broadcast on the big screen at a concert, how would you feel? We're talking about the leadership lessons from the Coldplay concert next on Crossroads and Catalyst. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss how a thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. Well, if you haven't heard about the incident that took place at the Coldplay concert recently, then you should, if for no other reason than the implications that it has on professionalism and workplace ethics. I'm going to give you some things to consider because this is extremely important. And why is it important? Why should we take it seriously? Because it has implications for all of us. None of us is free from the possibility of an ethical slip. And this is at the heart of the matter. You have this situation with the CEO of the organization and the chief of HR who are involved in an illicit relationship that uh, I'm sure was not disclosed to the board. And certainly their spouses were completely unaware of this relationship that had taken place. And I think we can all acknowledge that this is an extremely hurtful and devastating situation that has been confronted by all parties involved. And what a way to find out something like this about your spouse. It's hurtful and it's damaging not only to the people involved, but even to the organization itself. Nobody knew the name of this company. Well, only those who had business dealings with them, but now they're plastered all over the news. And all over social media for that matter, and all of the jokes that have come up about as a result of this, all jokes aside, actions have consequences. And we can clearly see that this is part of the reason why they do, and this is fallout of it. We want to talk about the power dynamic in this situation. And before we get into that, make sure that you share this episode with someone, leave a review, and also leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. Now, you have this power dynamic that's going on here, where again, you have the CEO, the person at the top of the org chart, who, for all intents and purposes, has ultimate authority within the organization. Apart from the board, this person can do just about whatever it is that they want to do within some type of boundary, right? And then you have the chief of HR, and it doesn't just have to be between the CEO and the chief of HR, because it's not necessarily about uh, those particular roles, because this could be between colleagues. This could be uh, but and I guess at the more middle level, a leader and someone else on their team. The point is that you have this power dynamic, and the power dynamic is not specifically male versus female. It's leader versus subordinate. And this particular situation, um, we don't know if someone was exploited. We don't know if someone was coerced. We don't even know who initiated it. What we do know is that someone has already resigned, and another person may be about to lose their job, but that remains to be seen. A few other things do stand out, which of course is the most obvious. Like I said, you have the person at the top of the org chart who has all of the authority and the potential abuse of power. And I'm not saying that he did abuse his power, but again, from the outside looking in, there's an appearance thereof. And there's a verse in the Bible that tells us that we should avoid the appearance of evil. There's a reason why you avoid the appearance of evil, because people can misconstrue and misinterpret a thing. And sometimes it can be very benign. But when it comes to illicit relationships, well, you've crossed into some territory where you really don't want to find yourself. Well, and not only that stands out, but you have a conflict of interest. Just think about the fact that you have HR, the the one company in the organization that is responsible to make sure that everything stays on the up and up is on the down low. Now, I don't know about y'all, but who trusts an HR leader who is hiding things such as this? I mean, it just looks bad in so many ways. So HR in this particular scenario is now compromised and they've lost all credibility. And then of course you have the issue where, okay, maybe it was consensual. We're assuming that it was, but it still is bad. It's still a terrible situation. And this is not the only type of scenario where this occurred. You probably didn't hear about it because it didn't occur on a jumbotron, but the Coles former CEO was fired several months ago because he was involved in a relationship with one of the vendors, and I think was signing contracts and was doing business dealings with this vendor. Well, again, the higher you climb, the more information you're required to disclose. It's called accountability because companies and board members do not want to be caught off guard by some of the shenanigans that are taking place in people's lives. That's why you have these boards to help keep things, um, to put things in the right light and to make sure that people are not surprised because, again, there are some serious ramifications that take place as a result. So we want to talk about the some of the red flags that are present here. And I've kind of glossed over some of them, but number one, you got this power imbalance. Now, notwithstanding the fact that it could be consensual, well, how do we always know that? When you have a leader, uh, whether it's the CEO or a director or a manager, whatever the title is, if they're leading other people and they're involved in a relationship with someone on their team, it makes it makes the waters very muddy, for lack of a better word. And these kind of things can be so dangerous. People end up losing their jobs, and if you're not in the right frame of mind, if they go awry, you a lot of people could potentially be endangered. We all know that there's workplace violence that takes place, and sometimes the reason for the workplace violence is because relationships fell apart and one person is having a lot of difficulty working through the end of that relationship. So much so to where they can't handle it and they can't cope and they end up taking their frustrations and anxiety out in a different way. And so we just have to be cognizant of the situation when we proceed with these workplace relationships. Well, and not only that, you have uh, leadership roles that have an amplification of influence. So the power imbalance, and then depending on how high up this person is, makes it very difficult to say no. And again, that's not to say that in the Coldplay incident that that was an abuse of power, but when you bring that closer to home, closer to where you and I work, there sometimes are these situations where the influence of a particular person and their title kind of overrides or supersedes someone else's ability of ability to say something, and so it makes it a challenge. And consent becomes very complicated in these situations, and that's why you want to try to avoid it. Or if it's something that's not between people who are already involved outside of the work, like with a spouse, then it might be that you have to kind of make your situation known. You just have to understand what the policy is at your organization about relationships. And the reason why I say that is most of you are probably aware that the military has very strict rules on relationships between um, colleagues. And they still put people in Leavenworth, Kansas, in the prison in Leavenworth for having illicit relationships. You don't want to be caught up in something like that. Now, of course, that's the military. We're civilians. But the fact that they place such a high priority on something like that, they recognize that it is a disgusting thing to find yourself in a situation where you have cheated on your spouse? HR has a role, and their responsibility is to safeguard uh, the organization and its policies and to represent fairness and compliance. And how can you do that if your credibility is damaged? You cannot do that because people don't trust you. And the reputation and organizational impact has long standing implications. It has ripple effects across the organization, and it could take a long time to recover from something like this. And then you add to that the public perception. A company called Astronomer that nobody knew, now all of a sudden they know. I can guarantee you this is not the way that they want it to be known in the media. And so this is what happens when people are not careful and they cross lines. So then what do you do? How do you handle situations like this? Because a lot of people, they meet their spouses at work. So notwithstanding the consensual aspect of these some of these relationships, you still want to set some clear and professional boundaries. And how do you do that? Well, sometimes you just have to make plain some things that you will and will not do. It could be as simple as leaving the door open when you have a one on one conversation in your office. Now, that might seem a little extreme, but I can guarantee you there are a lot of people out here who are happy that they did not invite someone in their office to have a conversation one on one, a meeting one on one. This has come back to bite many people. And why would you put yourself at risk if there's something that you can do to prevent it? I've heard I've heard things on boundaries such as people will not drive in the car with someone who is not their spouse. You know, there are all kinds of things you have to do what you think is reasonable to protect your integrity so that you will not be called into question. And if you do start a relationship, especially if you're at a high level and executive position, you'll need to you'll need to check your organization's policy on what it says regarding relationships because some organizations prohibit workplace relationships while others remain a little bit silent and they leave that to the employee's discretion, but it might be uh, that you have to disclose it because you can't lead or manage someone with whom you are romantically involved. And especially if you're an executive and you have board uh, oversight over you, you might have to disclose that relationship. And it's better to do that early rather than late because you don't want something to hit the fan and then things go awry. And then again, they're caught off guard because that might mean the end of your job. And then also understand the appearance of impropriety. If you don't get why perception matters, then you might not be in the right position. We might already need to question some of your decision making. While we don't do things to please people and we don't just not do something because of the way that it looks, we still want to consider the overall impact of a situation because sometimes it would be more effective to do it in a different way. Um, and that certainly is something that we need to keep at top of mind. And then not only that, good character matters. It does not matter how many guidelines or boundaries are set if you do not have good character. People are looking up to you. And as a leader, it is your responsibility to set a good example. Most of us are not thinking about being a role model when we step outside of our homes. But a lot of people are looking to you as a role model because that actually is a part of your job. It's the implicit aspect of your job. And in a lot of cases, you look at job descriptions for companies and they have uh, they have notifications or acknowledgments within those job descriptions that you are expected to abide by a code of ethics, or You're supposed to be aligned with the mission, vision, and values of the organization, so on and so forth. So people place a high value on your behavior, on your character, on your integrity. And if you demonstrate that by involving yourself in relationships that are unseemly or illicit or that are countercultural to the organization and maybe even to the public in general, well, then you might not be a good fit for the organization. So if you're in leadership, what I want you to consider is what policies or personal rules protect you from crossing a line. Are there any? This is important because we do live in a litigious society. You have people who are bickering back and forth. Things can be misconstrued. You make someone upset and they have a vendetta against you. There are ways that you have to consider as to how you engage other people and what kind of policies might be in place to help mitigate that. And if you're in HR, how do you hold the line when it comes to your own roles ethics? If you are someone who is in HR, you have to ask yourself, how does this how does this relationship impact my job? And oftentimes we think, oh, well, it won't change anything. I won't have any bias. Well, like I can tell you, people will not believe that. They will not believe that your decision making will not be impacted by that relationship. And so it behooves you to take a strong stance and draw those boundaries so that uh, you don't have to explain sometime down the road why the situation occurred and what you can do to get over it. So I would encourage you to, take a full scope view and understand the business and setting the boundaries and the culture and the integrity of the organization and the people working within that organization. Because power without boundaries is a liability. And you do not want to be caught flat footed, having taken for granted the authority and the power that is associated with your position and abusing it in a way uh, that would compromise not only yourself, but the organization and maybe even employees of that organization. And I trust that this has been helpful to you. And if you've seen a leader's personal choices undermine their professional credibility, I want to hear about it. Send an email to me, connect@crossroadsandcatalysts.com. And remember to leave a review and even drop a comment if you're watching this by YouTube. So be strong, be wise, and be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. I'll talk to you next week.